this video, we'll cover how to answer tough interview questions, as well as how to answer behavioral questions. When you're in the interview, it's important to listen to the questions carefully and take your time to answer. Now, obviously, you don't want to take 5 minutes to answer each question, but if you can pace yourself, I think it'll cut down on the amount of stress you may be feeling in the interview. And it's perfectly fine to ask for clarification or to repeat the question to make sure that you heard it correctly. Also, as always, if you can cite specific examples in your answer, it'll make your impression that much stronger. Some of the common interview questions that I hear people struggle with are, tell me about yourself. What is your greatest weakness? And why did you leave your last job? Let's look at each question together. The tell me about yourself question is not the time to tell your whole life story. What the employer wants to hear is you talk about your educational and work background, your key strengths, as well as talk about your career direction. It's a lot of information to provide for that one question, but it really sets the stage for the rest of the interview. You can also think of this as your 60-second elevator pitch. If the employer only had the amount of time with you, what would you want them to know about you? What's your greatest weakness? This question trips people up a lot because in the interview, you want to stay positive and focus on what you can bring. But since no one is perfect, you'll probably have this question asked in your interview. I would not recommend disguising a strength as your weakness because it is overused. For example, I'm a perfectionist, or I'm impatient. You'll get more mileage out of talking about something that is a true weakness that you're working on, but not essential to the position. It shows that you're human and are working to improve yourself, which employers like to see. And then the last question, why did you leave your last job? This can be a tough question, especially if you didn't leave your last employer on good terms. I wouldn't be completely honest and say something like, it was a personality clash, or my boss was impossible to work for. This will send a red flag up to the interviewer, because if you didn't fit in with their company, who's to say that you won't do the same to them down the road? Your best bet would be to talk about desiring new challenges, or for a job with a better future, etc. By law, there are questions that you don't have to answer if they fall into any of these categories: race, age, religion, sexual orientation, marital status, gender, parental status, or nationality or ethnicity. Because state and federal laws are pretty strict nowadays with these types of questions, you probably aren't going to be encountering them in an interview. But if you do, there are some ways that you can navigate through them. You could answer the question, although it could give them the reason not to hire you. You could refuse to answer it, but you could be seen as being stubborn or that you're trying to hide something. You could question the question. You can ask, can you tell me what this question has to do with the job that I'm applying for? You could also address the underlying concern. For example, if an interviewer asks you if you have children, you could say something along the lines of, if you're concerned about my children affecting my ability to do my job, I can assure you that I'm committed to this position and I take my career seriously. Let's switch gears a bit and talk about answering behavioral questions. These questions are designed to find out how you either will react or have reacted in similar situations. The interviewer is trying to figure out whether the behavior you exhibited would fit in with the organization's values and culture. You can easily tell that a behavioral question is being asked because it usually starts with, tell me about a time, or have you ever been in a situation, or give an example of. Some examples of behavioral questions could be, tell me about a time where you worked as part of a team, or tell me about a time when you had to work with an angry customer, or tell me about a time where you worked effectively under pressure. An easy way to answer behavioral questions would be the STAR method, which stands for situation, task, action, and result. The situation is asking, what happened? The task is asking, what did you need to do in the situation, or what was your role? The action is asking, what did you do about it? And the result is asking, what was the end result? You may be thinking, well, what if I don't have examples of these things? That's okay. What I would recommend doing is saying, I don't have direct experience with this, but here is how I would approach it. Then, you can answer the question based on how you would behave in that situation. It's obviously not as great as having concrete examples, but it shows that you're able to think outside the box and can tie in other knowledge areas to fill the gap.